Last episode, we finished up the west end of downtown, so now I think it's time to move on to the next phase of the series. One of the most important parts of Duluth's cityscape, and of course ours as well, is the massive freshwater port, which actually takes up significantly more land on its own than every other part of the city that we've built so far combined. So this is going to be an absolutely huge undertaking, especially since I'm not too well versed in industrial builds, so even from a creative standpoint, I think it's going to be quite a challenge. So I wanted to ease into it today with something a bit more familiar. If you'll remember back to episode 7, we made this entertainment district built on reclaimed dockland, taking inspiration from Duluth, of course. And today we're going to build the more spread out counterpart to this, making something inspired by the nearby Bayfront Festival Park. And after that, we're going to build a mixed-use area on the pier to the left. The park's going to be segmented into a few different uses, just like the one in Duluth, so I wanted to add in a few different access points. Car access is going to come from this avenue to try to minimize the car traffic going through the entertainment district, and then the main entrance is going to take the form of a mixed-use road with a streetcar line that comes over from the streetcar stop at the arena and goes all the way over to the center of the park. So I'm going to connect the tracks where they pass through the roundabout here over to this road, which I'm going to use to make a custom streetcar road, banning private vehicles in the center lanes and adding a custom brick texture to them with IMT, which I think looks a lot nicer and more inviting to serve as a mixed-use entrance road as opposed to just this blank piece of concrete. I am going to carry the car lanes all the way through to the terminus of this road at the center of the park, and the reason for that is that I wanted to get the most flexibility out of it. So on days where there's no event going on, people would be free to drive down into the park and be dropped off, but on event days, I'm imagining that they'd close off this whole street to cars and limit it to just pedestrians and the streetcars, of course. Anyway, I'm going to use a reversible tram segment here so that I don't have to make a giant loop of track at the end, as beautiful as that would be, and then extend the line so that it stops out here and detail up the cute little station. Don't get too mad, but we are going to be building a couple of parking lots for the more permanent attractions in the park. There's one for the Science Center and Planetarium, which are going to be taking place of Duluth's Great Lakes Aquarium, which is in this spot. And then you might have noticed previously that there's this L-shaped parking lot up in the top right corner, which is going to be for accessing the permanent park fixtures like the playground and the trail network. A bit more interesting than either of those swaths of asphalt is this dirt lot in the top left corner. I'm thinking that this would be more along the lines of your standard fairground lot, where it's going to be more of a flex space, where you could either have events set up like a farmer's market or something like that, or for bigger events, they use it as a parking lot for all the poor souls who aren't aware that you can ride our luxurious streetcars right up to the park's doorstep. So with all of the entrances and networks set up, it's time to get building. We're going to start out with this playground up in the top right next to the permanent parking lot, basically recreating the one from Duluth with the gravel playground area around the outside and then a kind of picnic area in the center, with all these paths connecting up to the parking lot and also to the larger trail system that runs through the park that we're going to build in a bit. I didn't have a park shelter asset like the one you see in Duluth, so I wanted to switch it up and have kind of a centerpiece in the middle that's on theme with the nearby Science Center and Planetarium. Given that the Cities Skylines world is apparently flat, I'm not sure if using a globe is lore accurate or not, but we can set that discussion aside for another day and move on with the build. So I decided that there's going to be an event going on in the park, which we're going to get to later. So that meant that the multi-use lot is going to have to be in parking lot mode. To add functionality to this, I'm going to plop down these parking lot assets, kind of straddling the road so that you can have perpendicular parking on either side. At the time, I honestly had no idea if this was going to work out or not, but thankfully it did, because cars do end up parking here and the spacing turns out just right. To cover up the spaces between the networks, I'm going to use these classic mud decals. I don't know if these are the perfect look to match with the road asset that I'm using, since they do look pretty wet and the road surface looks pretty dry, but I wanted some kind of difference in the texture between the driving surface and the parking surface, so I think that kind of emphasizes that. Nearby, there are a couple smaller facilities, like a restroom area down here, and then an additional multi-use lot, which maybe could be used for smaller events or storing things you want to keep out of sight during a big event, or maybe by people doing things they don't want to be seen doing, like building a park in a video game at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday night. Before getting too much deeper into the park, I wanted to detail the surroundings a bit so that I don't forget about doing that later on. The avenue that runs parallel to the railway here is mostly meant to be basically a highway that serves to access the port from the city. So I'm going to cover up the sidewalk here using the grass network from the big parking lot set. Then to create the turn lanes for people who are using this road to enter the park, I'm going to add in these yellow striped things, I don't know what you'd call them, just to squeeze a little bit of lane math out of this road. I'm thinking that they expanded part of it to this much wider version when they developed the convention center on the other half of the wharf. I've seen this sort of thing a decent amount in real life, where you transition from a much more modern and wider avenue to the older, smaller road. And that seems to be the case in Duluth, in the analogous location, although theirs does look a lot better than mine, I'll admit. Anyway, other than the road details, I also wanted to add in a nice row of trees and other foliage to serve as kind of a sound barrier between the road and the park. Over here, there's a small staging area for behind-the-scenes stuff like employee parking, storage, garbage, all that wonderful stuff. The path network for the park is going to consist of a couple parts, with the main length running along the wharf and then along the shoreline and over to the convention district, connecting up with the path network there. And then there are some secondary paths connecting up the other areas of the park with the outer path. So everything kind of leads you out to the nicest part of the park, which would be the walk along the waterfront. I did have a bit of trouble making the network look natural and just kind of feel like it's fit into the environment properly. Obviously, the outer part was pretty easy as it just follows the shore, but for whatever reason, I struggled to make the inner portions look good. One thing that I think helped a lot with that problem was covering up some of the built-in sidewalks on the roads and replacing them with paths that are a bit farther removed from the roads. Of course, that's a lot of extra effort to get everything lined up, but I think it does make everything feel a bit more oriented around the paths and the buildings rather than the road network. The Science Center and Planetarium are going to be pretty light on details, since most of the fun stuff would be going on inside the buildings. But I did want to add a couple of things. So around back of the main Science Center building, there's a small delivery area. Since this building has such an unusual shape, I'm going to make it a bit more accessible by clipping in these industrial buildings so that there's the appearance of a usable facade here. Then, after adding all the usual sorts of details, I'm going to drag the building's spawn point back here so that all the service vehicles that come to and from this building will actually use this road. At least I think that's how this mod works. The rest of the details are going to be a bit more predictable. I'm just adding in some planters and pathways to break up the ground texture a bit, and surrounding the parking lot and the rest of the Science Center campus with a row of hedges, because I do want this part of the park to feel a bit more isolated and separated from the rest, since it's going to be a separate business that operates year-round whether or not there's an event going on in the rest of the park. I also tried adding a little garden area around back with some purple and white flowers, trying to establish a little color scheme. I don't think it looks great on its own, but I did add in a few more patches on the other side of the building, which I think sort of brings the area together, but I'm still not 100% sold on it. But let me know what you think of the flower beds. I I wanted the whole park, including the Science Center, to draw a significant amount of traffic, especially considering that it's supposed to be late summer, so there would still be outdoor events going on pretty frequently here. To simulate that, I'm going to clip a commercial block in to serve as a gift shop, an entertainment block to attract some loiterers, and then I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball here, but I'm going to use a Science Center block so that it can function as a Science Center. For the park at large, I'm going to hide this invisible park entrance and designate the entire thing as a park area and give it the original name Amaranth Bay Festival Park, also known as ABUFP, which I hope I'll someday be able to replace with a better name. So let me know if you have any suggestions, preferably something that can be shortened to a nice, snappy acronym to go along with ABED. Since I've kept going on and on about how this park is used for events, I figured that it would be ridiculous to not have some sort of event going on. So what is happening here is going to be a somewhat interesting concert, which we'll detail up in a bit. But first I wanted to create some of the sort of accessory activities you might see pop up during a concert. Basically, that's going to involve a miniature version of a state fair, with a bunch of tents and concessions. So you have people selling pretty much a little bit of everything, merch and flowers. Basically, this is what I had in my asset collection at the time. And of course, cheese, because we are unfortunately neighbors with Wisconsin, so we have to have some cheese. All these tents get their own clutter around back as well, and then I'm going to take them and copy them over on the other side just to make it look a bit bigger than it actually is. It's not going to be a massive event by any means, but I think having a few tents here and there just makes it feel a bit more alive to sell that there is something going on here. Oh, and there's also a beer tent, because why not? It was pretty fun to do this kind of build and makes me want to do maybe like an entire state fair build. Maybe in a future episode. I think that would be a lot of fun. Now we're going to move on over and detail up the stage to make it look like there's actually a concert going on. Around back, there's a small service road for setting up the event, so in this case, they've bussed out the performers and all the musical paraphernalia in, and they parked out back. This stage asset by King Leno is pretty cool because the seating is sunken down into the ground and then the stage is at ground level. What's not so cool is that I wanted to have it completely full of people, so I have to go in and plop them down by hand. With that fun task out of the way, we need something for the audience to actually watch. I'm going to measure out the size of the stage with this path and then move it on over here so that it's a lot easier to work with. And then when I'm done, I'll just move everything back to the stage. Since we established a few episodes ago that Amaranth Bay loves Mozart in particular for some reason, and also this orchestra prop pack by Sven Berlin had been uploaded not long before I did this build, we're going to have it be a classical concert. So I tried more or less accurately to arrange the performers on the stage according to how it's done for orchestras. Although I did somehow manage to not put down any clarinet players, so sorry about that. Now we're going to take the entire orchestra, including this exquisitely bearded pianist, over to the stage and then get to work on lighting the stage and the performers and also the rest of the park. At first I tried changing the built-in lights using BOB, but I quickly decided that I wanted to place them by hand instead, just to get a slightly more intentional looking pool of light on the orchestra. I also didn't really like the floor lights being here for this kind of performance, so I'm just gonna remove those altogether and pretend that they are there but turned off. The rest of the park is really straightforward to light up, so I'm just gonna take these nice street lamps and dot them at regular intervals along the paths. And with that, we're finished with the park. So even though that's done, it's not quite the end of the video because I wanted to add a couple more things to show how the old docks have been given a new life. In the same way we took inspiration from Duluth and connected the convention center to Canal Park by a pedestrian bridge back when we did that build, I wanted to connect the next pier over to the festival park with one as well. I'm going to use the same bridge asset as last time, but shape it a little differently so that it hopefully doesn't look too similar. Because I wanted this area to have a completely different feeling than the other side of the docks, because this pier is supposed to be a bit more of a trendy, mixed-use zone consisting of a hotel, a couple of restaurants, and some modern apartments, so I wanted the look to reflect that. Before putting down any of the buildings, though, I'm going to custom make a quay by running these elevated paths around the perimeter, using some terraforming roads to make sure we get a nice vertical transition and don't have any lumpy pieces of terrain sticking out on the sides or any gaps up above. And then using IMT to add a modern-looking retaining wall all the way around the outside. I wanted it to look new because I imagined that they would have completely ripped up the old quay and installed a new one to get rid of the industrial look because, again, this is supposed to be a bit more of an upmarket district. We're going to start off the detailing with these apartments. They have a built-in overhang with parking underneath, but I wanted to change that a little bit with just a small area overhanging our custom parking lot and then the rest covering up a pedestrian walkway, hoping to make these apartments just that tiny bit more pedestrian friendly. The street-facing side gets the usual sorts of details, and then I can just take this single building with all the attached detailing and paste it into the remaining lots, which is nice because it probably saves me about 10-15 minutes of my life, which I can then go on to spend fiddling around with some landscaping and the parking lots. Next, we're going to build something straight out of Duluth, which is this old cluster of silos that are still there to this day. They have this weird structure on top, which I thought might be a modern addition for modern use, but from what I can tell, it looks like it's been there since the very beginning. I've never seen silos quite like this with this sort of structure on top, but I'm just going to roll with it. So I'm going to take this warehouse building, squeeze it way down, and then clip in this generic looking industrial building just to get the facade of the windows there. In Duluth, it seems like they're there just for show, but in Amaranth Bay, I want them to be in use. So they're using this weird little building on top as a restaurant. Right next door to the silos is the hotel, which is comprised of the main tower and then a larger and shorter first floor where I'm thinking they'd have things like event rooms and maybe some shops, which I feel like are the sort of thing you see at this kind of hotel. Oh, and it's been nearly 20 minutes since we've built a proper parking lot, so... There's a restaurant at the equivalent hotel in Duluth that has outdoor seating along the waterfront, which I think is too nice of an idea to pass up. So I'm going to add that in here as well, even though it's maybe not so realistic to have a hotel in this kind of location with multiple restaurants attached to it, but oh well. The final touch for this pier is going to be a small marina. To start off, there's a public boat launch over at the far end, of course with a boat in the process of being launched, just like I'd always do back in the Todos Santos days, and then the actual docks running alongside the quay. I'm turning these into POs just to make sure that they're all perfectly aligned, although overall I am trying to cut down on my PO usage because I've been thinking about how awful the performance is going to be once we get deeper into the series, if I don't change my ways soon. But in this case, I think it's necessary just to make sure that everything is lined up properly. While I was placing down the boats, I also noticed this really weird doubling effect in the water, and I can't say if I've ever seen that in the game before. I don't know if it's always been there and I just haven't noticed it until now for some reason, or if I have some setting that I'm not aware of that's doing it. Either way, now that I've seen it, I can't stop seeing it everywhere, which is really fun. But it does make it a little bit harder to line up these boats because when I'm working quickly in the moment, my brain doesn't really register which one is the reflection and which one is the real boat. Anyway, there's a mirror image of the marina over on the other side, though I'm going to make it look a little bit less popular by culling the boat population just a little bit. I also realized that I forgot to add in some functionality before, so I'm going to clip in a hotel building to the hotel because I didn't have a service block for that, and a couple commercial blocks as well to represent the shops and restaurants that are here. Alright, here's a little bonus for you wonderful people who have somehow made it this far into the video. This is something I meant to do when we originally built the convention center, and that's making something inspired by this Leviathan in Duluth, which is the SS William A. Irvin, a lake freighter once owned by U.S. Steel that now serves as a museum. Unfortunately, there aren't any big lake freighters on the workshop, so I had to spin the narrative a little bit so that I could use this ocean-going steamship. After a bit of research, I think it's believable enough because steamships were on the decline around the same time that the St. Lawrence Seaway was opened, which would have allowed a vessel like this, at least in theory, to make it to Duluth. Coincidentally, the entertainment district in Duluth was also opened around this time, so at some point in the 60s, they would have bought this ship and retired her here, maybe as part of the opening of the entertainment district. Anyway, that's my ramble for the day. I'm just going to add some functionality into this by clipping in a tech museum service block and then call it a day. I hope that you enjoyed the video today, and I hope you're as excited as I am to get started on some proper industrial port builds. Thanks for watching.